I worked as a blind massage therapist because I was good with my hands. I had a lot of regulars who booked private home sessions. The tips were always incredible. People tend to be generous when they think you can't see the life they're living then. One day my sight suddenly returned. It was a miracle I couldn't explain. I thought about telling the world, but then I realized I was making 3 times more money than a sighted therapist. I decided to keep up the act, but that one choice led me into a memory that still haunts me to this day. My client for this session was a woman named Millie. She was in her early 30s, and one of my most frequent regulars. I rang the bell of a sprawling high-end villa on the edge of the city. Back when I was truly blind, I just knew she lived in a quiet neighborhood and paid better than anyone else now that I could see. It was obvious she was swimming in cash. "Come on," and a woman's voice called out from inside. As the door clicked open, I stepped inside and was immediately floored by what I saw. A woman with an incredibly refined face stood before me. She had long, wavy hair and wore a bold shade of red lipstick that matched her nails. She was wearing nothing but a thin, pale, pink silk nightgown. When I was blind, I could tell she had a small frame, and I always pictured her as a delicate, petite girl. The reality was the exact opposite. She was truly stunning. "It's just you, hurry up and get inside," Millie said, grabbing my arm. She turned and headed toward the living room sofa. Without a second thought, I faked it, tapping my white cane on the floor as I followed her, moving with that hesitant, practiced gait behind the living room. There was a lush backyard surrounded by a massive stone wall. Near the glass door's professional massage table was already set up before I could reach the table. I spotted movement on the stairs. A young guy in his early 20s was creeping down from the second floor. He was wearing nothing but a white bathrobe, chest bare. He wasn't wearing shoes, probably, so I wouldn't hear him. He blew a kiss to Millie and made a few suggestive gestures. Then he slipped out the back door. I kept my face neutral, but my eyes drifted to a framed photo on the wall. It was a wedding picture of Millie and a man who had to be at least 60 years old. She was cheating on her husband right under his nose. But then again, he was in the prime of her life. That older man probably couldn't keep up with her. I walked toward the table, using my cane to feel the furniture around me. "Where are we focusing today, Millie?" Millie walked over and took my hand. "Follow me." Her voice sounded exhausted, yet there was a strange, lingering trace of satisfaction in it as she got closer. The scent of her perfume and the heat of her skin hit me. She led me to the table, let her nightgown slide off her shoulders before lying face down. "Let's get started. I have a meeting later this afternoon." She muttered. The view in front of me made my heart skip a beat. I had to remind myself of my professional role. I forced myself to focus, opened the bottle of essential oil, and began the session. The moment my hands touched her skin, a low moan escaped her lips. She seemed to realize how it sounded and quickly apologized. "Sorry about that. I was just so exhausted from yesterday." I chuckled softly. I was worried I was being too rough already. Millie turned her head slightly to look back at me. "Actually, I want you to go harder. I really need to let go of some tension. I'll do my best. Just tell me if it's too much. By the way, have you been having trouble sleeping lately?" I asked, working the muscles in her shoulders. "How did you know?" she asked, her voice tight as she tried to stifle another sound. "I can feel it in your pressure points. Your energy flow is completely blocked." I pressed down on a specific spot on her neck. Her entire body jolted. Another muffled groan left her throat. "I'm so sorry. Did I hurt you?" Millie looked like she was in heaven. No, don't stop. Keep doing exactly that. You're the only one who actually knows what they're doing. Other therapists just go through the motions. Is there any way to fix this insomnia? I haven't had a good night's rest in days," she asked, biting her lower lip. "It's possible, but I need the deep tissue. Your neck and back, it's going to be pretty intense. I'm not sure you can handle the pain based on what I was feeling." Her body was truly reaching a breaking point. Her blood flow was restricted by years of stress and bad posture. If she didn't fix it, she was going to end up in the hospital. Millie didn't hesitate. "It's fine. Do whatever you have to do. I can take it." She shifted her position on the table to give me better access. I stopped holding back. I opened a fresh bottle of oil, coated my hands, and began a standard deep tissue routine on her neck. At first, Millie didn't react much. She was clearly trying to stay composed. That changed when I hit the base of her neck. I felt a massive, hard knot right over her spine. The moment I applied pressure, she let out a sharp gasp. Right there, it's so sore, it's like a throbbing pain. Now that I'd found the source of the blockage, I used both thumbs to pin the knot and slowly worked the tension outward. After about 2 minutes, beads of sweat began to glisten on her neck and shoulders. Once I finished the set of movements, I knew the job was done for the day. "All set, Millie. We're finished for today already?" she asked, rolling over. Her eyes were watery and seemed to be searching for something more. I didn't dare look at her for too long. I I grabbed a towel to wipe my face and pretended everything was normal about the insomnia. You really need to take care of yourself. Don't overwork your body. This massage is just a temporary fix. You're sweet to care, she said. She stood up, a cloud of expensive perfume, following her as she headed toward the stairs. I feel all sticky from the oil. I'm gonna go upstairs and jump in the shower. You look like you're sweating too. If you're uncomfortable, you should come up and wash off. With me, my heart hammered against my ribs at the blatant invitation. I was supposed to be blind. If I got too close to her in a shower, there was a 0% chance I could keep the secret. Was she testing me? I couldn't tell. Most women are hesitant about male therapists, but the blind part usually makes them feel safe. Combine that with the fact that I wasn't exactly ugly and I was quite popular with the female clientele. Millie wasn't my first client to be friendly, but she was definitely the boldest. I thought about it for 3 seconds before deciding to decline. If the spa found out I was getting intimate with clients, I'd be fired. If Millie found out I was faking my blindness, I'd be sued. Or worse, I'd love to. But the shop is slammed today. I can't stay away for too long, I lied. Packing my bag, I said my goodbyes and practically ran out of that villa I worked until well past midnight back at the clinic before finally heading to my small apartment. I had just finished my own shower and was ready to pass out when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It was Millie. Why was she calling this late? I hesitated and hit the green button. Hello. Why did it take you so long to pick up? Her sultry, lazy voice drifted through the speaker. Sorry, Millie. I was just getting into bed. It took me a minute to find the phone. You know how it is for me. Is everything okay? Ugh. It's the same old problem. That massage helped for a while, but now that it's night, I can't sleep. Can you come over right now and work on me again? Millie was gorgeous, and her vibe was top tier. She was better looking than most celebrities on TV. Any man would dream of a woman like her. And I was no exception, but I knew my place. Women like Millie were dangerous for guys like me. Millie, it's the middle of the night. It's probably not a good idea. I stammered. Don't worry about that. Just grab an Uber. I'll make it worth your while. I'll pay you double. Since she put it that way, I couldn't really say no. I was doing this job for the money. After all, and Millie was a gold mine. I agreed. Got dressed and headed back to the villa. I had no idea that this single decision was about to lead me down a path of no return. The headlights of the Uber sliced through the midnight gloom as we wound our way back toward the edge of the city. My mind a chaotic storm of greed and apprehension. I stared out the window, watching the neon signs of the late-night diners and gas stations blur into streaks of pale light. For months, I had been living a double life, playing the part of the harmless, sightless therapist who existed only to soothe the aches of the wealthy. It was a lucrative lie, built on the assumption that because my eyes were dead, my discretion was absolute. But as the cab pulled up to the iron gates of Millie's villa, a cold prickle of sweat traced its way down my spine. The gates were already open, yawning wide like a trap. I paid the driver, took a deep breath, and stepped out into the cool night air. The moment my feet hit the gravel, I fell back into character. I snapped my white cane open, letting the tip sweep in a rhythmic, practiced arc across the stones. Tap, top, top. The villa was dark, save for a single amber light glowing behind the sheer curtains of the second-floor master bedroom. I made my way up the steps, my ears straining for any sound. Before I could even raise my hand to knock, the heavy oak door creaked open. You're late, Millie whispered. She was standing in the dim entryway. Even in the shadows, I could see she was wound tight. The effortless, seductive confidence she usually wore was gone, replaced by a jagged, manic energy. She had changed out of her pink nightgown and into a dark, silk robe that she kept pulling tight around herself, her fingers twitching against the fabric. I'm sorry, Millie, I said, keeping my voice low and soothing, my eyes staring blankly at a spot just above her left shoulder. Finding a cab at this hour isn't easy. But I'm here now. Good. Come upstairs, she said, her voice trembling slightly. She didn't grab my arm this time. She just turned and walked up the carpeted staircase, her bare feet making no sound. I followed her, my cane tapping lightly against the wooden risers. My eyes, however, were wide open, taking in every detail. The house felt different tonight. The luxurious, quiet air of the afternoon had curdled into something suffocating. As we reached the landing, a faint, metallic scent hit my nose, sharp, cold, and instantly recognizable to anyone who has ever cut themselves. It was the smell of blood. My heart began to hammer against my ribs, but I kept my pace slow, hesitant, and perfectly aligned with my blind persona. Millie led me into the master bedroom. It was massive, dominated by a king-size canopy bed. The covers were messy, piled high in the center. On the bedside table sat an empty bottle of prescription sleeping pills and a glass of water. Arthur is asleep, Millie whispered, nodding toward the bed. He took his medication. We have to be very quiet. Just work on my neck and shoulders here. On the chaise lounge, I glanced at the bed. Under the heavy duvet, I could see the outline of a large, motionless form. It had to be her husband, Arthur. He was lying completely still, face down, his head buried deep into the pillows. Too still. Of course, I said, setting my bag down. I felt my hands shaking and quickly rubbed them together to hide the tremor. Let's get you relaxed. Millie lay down on the leather chaise lounge, facing away from the bed. I poured a few drops of chamomile oil onto my palms, the scent fighting vainly against that lingering metallic smell in the room. As I leaned over her and pressed my hands into her shoulders, I realized she was stiff as a board. Her muscles weren't just tense, they were locked in a state of sheer panic. Deep breaths, Millie, I murmured, keeping my gaze fixed on the wall ahead, though my peripheral vision was scanning the dark corners of the room. Suddenly, the door to the master bathroom creaked open. My muscles froze for a fraction of a second before I forced myself to relax. I didn't turn my head. A blind man wouldn't know someone was there unless they made a distinct sound. From a shadow of the bathroom stepped the young guy I had seen earlier on the stairs, the 20-something lover. He was dressed in dark jeans and a black hoodie, his face pale and slick with sweat. He wasn't wearing shoes. He carried a heavy, ornate brass statuette, one of the decorations from the downstairs hallway. My breath caught in my throat. I kept my hands moving on Millie's shoulders, my thumbs kneading her upper back, but my mind was screaming. Get out. Get out right now. The young man looked at me, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and adrenaline. He raised a finger to his lips, gesturing for me to stay quiet, forgetting for a moment that I was supposed to be blind. Then, remembering my condition, he smirked. It was a sickening, twisted expression of pure arrogance. He realized he was invisible to the only witness in the room. He tiptoed toward the bed. I watched him in the mirror on the vanity wall. I had to keep my eyes blank, staring straight ahead at the floral wallpaper, while my mind registered the horrific crime unfolding just feet away. The lover reached the side of the bed. He raised the brass statuette high above his head. No, I thought. Oh God, no. With a sudden, brutal, downward stroke, he brought the heavy statue down onto the back of Arthur's head. There was a muffled, sickening thud, followed by a low, wet groan from beneath the blankets. The form under the duvet began to thrash weakly. What was that? I gasped, playing my part. I pulled my hands back from Millie's shoulders, stumbling backward a step, letting my cane clatter to the floor. Millie, did you hear that? It's nothing. Just a noise outside. Millie cried out, her voice cracking. But she didn't get up. She stayed on the lounge, her eyes locked onto her lover as he struck the man in the bed a second time. And then a third. The thrashing stopped. The room fell into a horrifying, heavy silence, broken only by the ragged breathing of a young killer. I stood there, my hands raised in front of me in a defensive, blind gesture, my heart thrashing like a trapped bird. My eyes were wide, staring into the empty space of the room, but I saw everything. I saw the blood soaking through the white duvet. I saw the young man wipe the brass statue with a towel, his hands shaking violently. And then Millie began to act. She let out a piercing, blood-curdling scream that made my skin crawl. Arthur! Oh my God, Arthur! Someone's in the house. Help! The young man ran to the balcony doors, threw them open, and purposely knocked over a glass vase, shattering it on the hardwood floor to create the illusion of a struggle and an escape. He slipped out into the darkness of the balcony, disappearing down the trellis. Millie, what's happening? Who's there? I yelled, my voice genuinely cracking with terror. I didn't have to fake the fear. It was consuming me. Millie rushed over to the bed, throwing herself onto the bloody sheets. Arthur, please wake up. Oh God, he's bleeding. He's not breathing. She scrambled across the floor and grabbed my wrist with a grip like ice. Help me. You have to help me. Feel him. Is he alive? She dragged me toward the bed. I had no choice. I had to play the blind man who didn't know what he was stepping into. My foot tripped on the edge of the rug, and I fell forward, my hands landing directly on the wet, warm duvet. The copper smell of fresh blood filled my senses. I let out a genuine gasp of horror, pulling my hands back and wiping them frantically on my jeans. There's blood. I cried, my voice trembling. Millie, what happened? Where is he? An intruder, she sobbed. Though as I looked at her face through my carefully unfocused eyes, I saw something chilling. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, and completely dry. She was studying my face, searching for any sign of recognition, any hint that I'd seen the boy, or the statue, or her own cold compliance. Someone broke in through the balcony. They hit him. Oh God, I have to call the police. She grabbed her phone and dialed 911. Her voice instantly shifting back into a frantic, hysterical wail as she spoke to the dispatcher. Within 15 minutes, the quiet neighborhood was alive with the red and blue flashes of police cruisers. The rest of the night was a blur of flashing lights, yellow crime tape, and the smell of cheap coffee. I was sitting in the back of an ambulance, a shock blanket wrapped around my shoulders. A paramedic had cleaned the blood from my hands, but I could still feel the phantom warmth of it on my skin. A man in a trench coat walked over, holding a notepad. He had tired eyes and a badge clipped to his belt. "Mr. Thorne?" he asked, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. "I'm Detective Miller. I need to ask you a few questions about what happened inside." I'll try, Detective," I said, turning my head slightly to the left, pretending to aim my ear toward his voice. But I didn't see anything. "I'm blind." "I know," Miller said, his tone sympathetic but professional. "But sometimes in cases like this, the eyes that don't see are the ones that hear the most. Tell me what you remember." I swallowed hard. This was the moment. If I told him the truth, that I saw a young man in a hoodie beat Arthur Vance to death while Millie watched, I would have to admit I could see. The police would find out I had been defrauding my clients for months, pretending to be disabled to triple my rates. But worse, much worse, Millie and her lover wouldn't know I was a witness. They had already proven they were willing to kill for money. If they knew I could see, I would be next. I was massaging Millie. I stammered, my voice shaking. We were being quiet because Mr. Vance was asleep. Then, I heard a heavy crash near the balcony, like glass breaking, and then a wet, heavy thud. Millie started screaming. I heard someone running, the balcony doors banging open. It all happened so fast. "Did you hear any voices?" Miller asked, his pen hovering over the notepad. "No, primelit. Just the footsteps. Fast, heavy steps, and the sound of someone breathing heavily." "And you didn't hear anyone enter the room before the attack?" "No," I said. "The carpet is very thick. I didn't hear a thing until the crash." Detective Miller scribbled something down. He stood there for a long moment, looking at me. I kept my eyes completely still, staring at the middle button of his shirt, praying that my pupils wouldn't dilate or react to the flashing police lights behind him. "All right, Mr. Thorne," Miller finally said, patting my shoulder. "We'll have an officer drive you home. We might need to bring you in for a formal statement later." "Of course," I said. "Anything to help." As the police car drove me back to my apartment, I stared out at the passing streetlights. I had survived the night, but the trap had already snapped shut around me. I was now an accomplice to a murder investigation, tied to a lie I couldn't afford to break. 2 days passed in a state of agonizing paranoia. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the brass statue coming down, heard the wet thud, and smelled the copper tang of blood. I went back to work at the clinic because staying home in my quiet apartment was driving me insane. But the safety I once felt in my blindness was gone. Every time a client entered the room, I found myself tensing up, wondering if they were watching me, testing me. On the third afternoon, my receptionist tapped on my door. "Julian, you have a walk-in. He specifically asked for you." "Did he book under a name?" I asked, adjusting my dark glasses. "Yeah, just Julian. Said a friend recommended you." I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. The young lover's name? I didn't know it, but the coincidence made my throat dry. "Send him in," I said. The door opened, and a young man walked in. He was wearing a leather jacket, his blonde hair styled neatly. It was him, the young lover from the villa. My heart skipped a beat, but I forced my face into a warm, welcoming smile. I stood up, tapping my cane slightly against the massage table. "Welcome, Julian. Go ahead and lay face down on the table when you're ready." "What are we working on today?" "Just some tension in my shoulders," he said. His voice was casual, but there was an underlying malice in it. He took off his jacket and lay down on the table. As I approached him, my hands trembling slightly, I took a deep breath to steady myself. I poured the oil and pressed my palms into his upper back. He was incredibly built, his muscles hard and tight. "So," Julian said, his voice muffled by the face cradle, "you're the famous blind therapist. I heard about you from a lady friend, Millie." I felt a jolt of pure panic go through me, but I kept my hands moving, maintaining a steady, professional rhythm. Millie. Yes, she's a regular of mine. Such a tragic thing that happened to her husband. I was actually there when it happened. It was terrifying. Yeah, must have been crazy for a guy like you," Julian said, a subtle sneer in his voice. "Just sitting there in the dark, hearing everything but seeing nothing. Tell me, did you hear the guy's face?" "Hear his face?" I asked, plain dumb. "You know what I mean. Did you get a sense of who he was? What he sounded like?" The police are asking a lot of questions. They think it might have been an inside job. Someone who knew the house. I applied a bit more pressure to a knot in his shoulder, forcing myself to act natural. I told the detective everything I knew. I just heard footsteps and a crash. When you can't see, the world is just a blur of noises. I couldn't tell you if the guy was young, old, tall, or short. To me, he was just a shadow in the dark. Julian let out a low, satisfied chuckle. "Good. That's smart. It's best for guys like you to stick to what they hear. Sometimes, people who think they know too much end up losing more than just their sight. You know what I mean?" It was a direct, naked threat. He was letting me know that he was watching me, that my life depended on my continued blindness. I understand completely, I whispered. Great, Julian said, patting the table. I think we're done here. I feel much better. He got up, tossed a $100 bill onto the table, and walked out without waiting for change. I stood there, staring at the door, my hands slick with oil and sweat. They knew where I worked. They knew who I was. I was a hostage to my own lie. The breaking point came 2 nights later. My phone buzzed on my nightstand at 1 a.m. It was Millie. My hand shook as I answered it. Hello, Julian, she said, her voice tight, devoid of any of her usual sultry warmth. I need you to come to the villa. Now. Millie, it's late, and after what happened. I don't care, she snapped. I'll pay you 10 times your normal rate. Just get over here. We need to talk. The line went dead. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the dark screen. 10 times the rate wasn't a fee. It was a payoff. Or a trap. If I didn't go, they would think I was hiding something. If I did go, I might not walk out alive. I knew I couldn't go to the police. If I confessed to seeing the murder, I'd be charged as an accessory for withholding evidence. And my career, my entire life, would be ruined. I had to handle this myself. I got dressed, but before I left, I grabbed a small, voice-activated recording device I had bought after the clinic encounter. I slipped it into the breast pocket of my shirt, ensuring the microphone wasn't obstructed. I arrived at the villa at 1:45 a.m. The house was dark again, but the front door was unlocked. I tapped my way inside, my cane clicking against the marble floor of the entryway. Millie, I called out. In the kitchen, her voice replied from the back of the house. I walked toward the kitchen, my eyes wide open beneath my dark glasses. The kitchen was highly modern, all stainless steel and dark marble. Millie was sitting at the island, a bottle of expensive red wine open in front of her. She had a glass in her hand, and there were 2 other glasses sitting on the counter. Julian was standing in the shadows near the pantry, his arms crossed over his chest. He was watching me like a hawk. Sit down, Julian, Millie said, gesturing to a bar stool. I navigated to the stool, using my cane to find the leg before climbing up. I sat down, keeping my face turned slightly away from her, staring blankly at the wine bottle. You've been making me nervous, Millie said, pouring wine into one of the empty glasses. The police have been back here. They're asking about the security cameras. They want to know why they were turned off that night. I wouldn't know anything about that, Millie, I said softly. I'm just a therapist. I know, she said, sliding the glass of wine toward me. But Julian here thinks you're too smart. He thinks a blind man's ears are too sharp. He's worried you might remember something, like the sound of his voice, or the way he breathes. I looked at the glass of wine. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Julian subtly nod to Millie. My eyes drifted to the reflection in the polished marble countertop. In the dark reflection, I saw Julian's hand move. He had slipped a small, clear vial from his pocket. While my blind gaze was fixed forward, he reached over and tipped a few drops of clear liquid into my glass of wine. It was a classic, quiet execution. An overdose. A tragic accident for a blind man who couldn't see what he was drinking. My heart surged into my throat. If I drank it, I was dead. If I refused it, they would know I saw him poison it. Drink up, Millie said, her voice suddenly sweet, dripping with venom. It'll help calm your nerves. You look so tense. I reached out, my hand trembling realistically. I let my fingers brush against the stem of the glass, pretending to grope for it in the dark. Thank you, Millie, I said. I lifted the glass. I brought it close to my lips. My mind was racing, counting the seconds. I had to break the trap. I accidentally let my elbow strike the edge of the marble counter as I lifted the glass. Clash! The glass slipped from my fingers, shattering against the hardwood floor, spilling the dark red, poisoned wine across the pristine wood. Oh my God, I cried out, immediately fumbling around, pretending to be mortified. I am so sorry. I'm so clumsy tonight. My hands are shaking. I am so sorry, Millie. Julian swore under his breath, stepping forward with a scowl. You clumsy idiot. It's fine, Millie said, her voice tight with anger. She glared at Julian, then looked back at me. I'll pour you another. She reached for the wine bottle. But as she did, her phone, sitting on the counter, lit up with a text message. Because I was looking down, pretending to search for my cane, I saw the screen clearly. The contact name was Julian, but the message was from a different number, a preview of a text she had received earlier that she hadn't swiped away. It read, "The lawyer says the insurance clears in 48 hours. Once the blind guy is taken care of, we need to handle Jay. He's getting greedy. I don't want him in the picture." My breath hitched. Millie was planning to double-cross Julian. She was using a third party, likely another lover or a partner in crime, to get rid of the young boy once he had done the dirty work of killing her husband. In that split second, a desperate, wild plan formed in my mind. It was my only way out. I had to turn them against each other. Millie, I whispered, my voice trembling. I shouldn't say this. I've been so scared. Scared of what, Julian? She asked, pausing with the wine bottle in her hand. I turned my head toward Julian, but kept my eyes blankly focused past him. When I was here the afternoon before Mr. Vance died, I was in the bathroom downstairs, washing my hands. I heard you on the phone, Millie. You thought I was already in the living room. The kitchen went dead silent. Julian stood perfectly still, his eyes narrowing. What are you talking about? Millie said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming cold and dangerous. You were talking to someone, I said, letting a tear of genuine terror slip down my cheek. You said, Julian is a fool. You said as soon as he does it, we'll get rid of him too. He's too greedy. I didn't know what it meant then. I swear I didn't. But then Mr. Vance died. And tonight, when this young man spoke, I recognized his voice. He's the one you called Julian, right? The one who was here. Julian's face went completely pale. His gaze whipped from me to Millie. What's he talking about? He's lying, Millie yelled, her composure completely shattering. She stood up, knocking her stool backward. He's trying to play us. He's a blind piece of shit. Julian, don't listen to him. I'm not lying. I sobbed, shrinking back on my stool. I heard her. She said she was going to pin the whole thing on you. Julian, she said you were just a brainless kid she could use to get the inheritance. Julian looked at Millie. Then his eyes fell to her phone on the counter. Julian, no. Millie screamed as he snatched the phone. He quickly swiped the screen. Because he knew her passcode, or because it was already unlocked, he accessed her messages. His face twisted into a mask of pure, murderous rage as he read the screen. The text preview I had seen was right there. You bitch, Julian roared, his voice shaking. You were going to burn me? Julian, wait. That's not what it means. I can explain. You set me up, he screamed, lunging across the kitchen island. He grabbed Millie by the throat, slamming her back against the marble countertop. The wine bottle shattered, sending glass and dark red liquid flying everywhere. Let go of me. Millie choked out, clawing at his face, her perfect nails tearing red gashes down his cheeks. I slid off my stool and retreated into the corner of the kitchen. I dropped my cane. I didn't need it anymore. I stood there, my back pressed against the cold drywall, my eyes wide and fully focused. I watched the horror play out in brilliant, terrifying detail. Julian was stronger, driven by adrenaline and the betrayal of the woman he thought he loved. He pressed his weight down on her, his hands locked around her throat. Millie's face turned a horrific shade of purple, her legs kicking wildly against the cabinets. But Millie wasn't going down easily. With a desperate, blind flail of her arm, her fingers found the block of heavy kitchen knives on the counter. She pulled a long, silver carving knife from the block. With a sickening, wet slide, she drove the blade deep into Julian's side. Julian let out a sharp, breathless gasp. He stumbled backward, his hands releasing her neck as he clutched his torso. Blood, dark and thick, began to seep through his fingers, staining his black hoodie. You bitch. He gasped, coughing up a spray of crimson. He lunged at her again, his hands reaching for her face. Millie screamed, swinging the knife wildly. She slashed his shoulder, but Julian's weight bore her down to the floor. They crashed into the puddle of wine and blood, a chaotic, thrashing mass of limbs, screams, and tearing flesh. I stood in the corner, a silent spectator to a mutual slaughter. I didn't call for help. I didn't scream. I just watched, my eyes drinking in the brutal, poetic justice of their self-destruction. After what felt like an eternity, the thrashing slowed. Julian collapsed sideways, his eyes staring blankly at the ceiling, a pool of blood widening beneath him. He shuddered once, a long, rattling breath escaping his lips, and then went still. Millie lay beneath him, gasping for air. The knife had slipped from her hand, lying just out of reach. She had been stabbed in the chest during the final struggle, the front of her dark silk robe soaked in a deep, expanding blackness. She rolled over weakly, her fingers clawing at the slick floor, trying to pull herself toward her phone. She looked up, and for the first time, her eyes met mine. I wasn't staring at the wall anymore. I wasn't looking blankly into space. I was looking directly at her. My eyes were sharp, focused, and filled with a cold, steady contempt. I walked over to her, stepping over the broken glass and the puddles of blood, my gait perfectly balanced, confident, and entirely sighted. Millie's eyes widened in a look of sheer, unadulterated shock that transcended her physical pain. Her lips parted, trembling as she realized the truth. You, she whispered, her voice a wet gasp. I can see. Millie, I said, my voice calm, almost conversational. I've been able to see the entire time. A tear of pure terror and defeat rolled down her cheek, mixing with the blood on her face. She reached out a trembling, bloody hand toward me, begging for help, for an ambulance, for mercy. I looked down at her. I reached into my breast pocket and pulled out the small voice recorder. I pressed the stop button, the little red light blinking off. I had their entire confession, the struggle, and the murder on tape. I didn't help her. I just stood there and watched as the light slowly drained from her eyes until her hand fell limp against the hardwood floor. The kitchen was dead silent now. I took a deep breath, the metallic smell of blood filling my lungs. I looked at the two bodies lying in the ruins of their greed. I walked over to the counter, picked up Millie's purse, and opened it. Inside was a thick envelope stuffed with $100 bills, the 10 times rate she had promised me to buy my silence. I took the envelope and slid it into my pocket. Then, I picked up my white cane from the floor. I snapped it shut and tucked it into my bag. I walked out of the villa, stepping carefully to avoid leaving any bloody footprints. I walked down the gravel driveway, through the iron gates, and out into the quiet, dark streets of the city. The next morning, I delivered the voice recording anonymously to Detective Miller's office, along with a brief, typed note explaining that a concerned neighbor had overheard the struggle through an open window. The police ruled it a murder-suicide, a lover's quarrel over the stolen inheritance that turned deadly. I never went back to the massage clinic. I took the money I had saved, along with Millie's final tip, and left the city. Sometimes I still wake up in the middle of the night, my hands feeling slick with phantom blood, hearing the wet thud of a brass statue. But then I open my eyes, look out the window at the bright, beautiful world, and realize that some secrets are worth keeping in the dark.